Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Vinnie here, and today I'm going to show you how to replace an alternator on a 2007 to 2011 Honda CRV. Alright, so quickly, some of the symptoms of a bad alternator is going to be when you go to start the car, it may not start, and you might first think it's the battery, which it could be, but it could also be your alternator not charging your battery, hence why it was dead. You could also be driving the vehicle, and then all of a sudden a little red battery light might come down on the dash. It's at the bottom left on the CRVs, and if that starts to come on while you're driving, then the first thing I would look at is I would open the hood and look at the alternator pulley and make sure that it's actually spinning. If it's not spinning, then your alternator could be seized up and have gone bad. I noticed personally when I was just driving my vehicle that the battery light came on, and if I turned my AC on, everything started to dim down really bad. And the reason for that is because the alternator was going bad. I checked the belt looked all right, it's fairly new. You guys could see an installation of that in a previous video, and so today we're gonna get into this one and try to figure it out. A good way to be able to test your alternator if the car still runs is turn the car on, let it run, pop your hood open, get a multimeter, set it to DC, and you wanna put the positive terminal on the positive, the negative on the negative, and you wanna be reading over 12.6 volts. It should be somewhere like in the 13, maybe 14 range, but if it's stuck at like 12.6 or 12.8 or less, then it's most likely the alternator's gone bad. Another thing you could also do is check the alternator relay. There's a relay inside the vehicle. If that has gone bad, you could swap it out with a similar relay just to quickly test it, and that could also be another issue. I do recommend if you're gonna replace your alternator, you might as well replace the serpentine belt along with it, because you're gonna have it off doing this job. So with all that said, let's get into it. All right, now I'm gonna show you guys the tools and parts we're gonna use for this video. So I have a pair of gloves, some rags, we got the serpentine belt, the alternator, optionally an impact gun, a 1/2 inch breaker bar, those are to get off the wheel. I have torque wrenches, a 1/2 inch and a 3/8. I have a 1/4 inch and 3/8 ratchet with an assortment of extensions. I have a 1/4 inch cordless ratchet, and then I have a 10mm short and long, 12m short and long, 14mm short and long sockets. I also have a clip tool. I have a 14mm wrench. This is to get our belt off. And attached to this will be our 22mm wrench. This is going to be attached to our 14. This will be to get a little bit more torque while we're loosening the tensioner to get the belt off. And then I also have some battery terminal cleaning things right here. Of course, you're going to need a jack because we're going to remove the passenger side wheel, and then a jack stand. Then you're also going to want a pair of safety glasses and maybe a flashlight. There'll be links in the description for all the tools and parts used in this video. All right, first step, you're going to want to disconnect the battery. So disconnect both the positive and the negative, and make sure you tuck them off to the side so they don't accidentally touch anything. All right, the next step's going to be to jack up the passenger side of the vehicle, and you're going to remove the passenger side front wheel. That's a 19mm socket. All right, once you have the wheel removed, there's going to be 2 clips that goes into this plastic piece right here. You're going to want to remove those, and then there's going to be a 10mm up on the bottom and a few more clips. You don't have to remove all of them, but the more that you can remove, the more room that you'll probably have to see inside of the engine bay while we do this. All right, next step, we're going to disconnect the power steering reservoir. So there's a little tab in the back. You're just going to get a clip tool, bend that backwards, and then lift up the power steering fluid reservoir. And it should slide out just like that. So we're not going to disconnect the fluid reservoir, we're just going to push it off to the side. And if you look straight down in here, there's 2 10mm bolts. We're going to go ahead and remove that bracket. All right, so if you look down here, this bottom power steering fluid reservoir hose is attached by this little clip, which we can disconnect with our clip tool, and then that will set you free so you can get the hose out of there, and that'll give you a little more room to maneuver this power steering fluid reservoir out of the way a little bit more, like that. And then now that we have this out of the way, we can remove these 2 10mm bolts that holds this bracket in. It's good to put your finger on the bolt as you take it out so you don't lose it. Okay, now we're going to go in, remove the second one. All right, now the whole bracket should come just out like that. All right, next step, we're gonna remove the serpentine belt. And if you look right down here on that little tensioner pulley is a 14mm bolt. And we're gonna attach our wrench to that. See if I can show you guys. Get the box end of your 14 and we're gonna put that right on the tensioner pulley bolt. So there it is. And it's gonna sit on there just like that. Might be tough to see. 14mm wrench right on the tensioner pulley bolt. Then you're gonna get a bigger wrench. This is just a 22 and I'm gonna attach it to my 14 and pull on it towards the front of the vehicle to loosen the tension on the belt. And then you can slip the belt off of any of the pulleys so we can then remove it. All right, so I have tension on the belt and then I reach my hand down to one of the smoother pulleys and slide the belt off. And then as we let the tensioner go, I think you guys can see that the belt is now off. So we can remove our wrenches and our belt should be loose. Yep. And we can pull the rest of this off of the bottom pulleys. All right, and there is the belt. All right, and I do just want to note, some people end up removing this belt from the bottom. You can actually get your wrench from the bottom onto that tensioner pulley a little bit easier for some people, depending on the wrench. For me, I chose to do it at the top because I've done it so many times up here and this is just how it's familiar to me. All right, next step, we're actually gonna disconnect the power steering pump. We're gonna leave all the hoses attached and everything, but we're gonna take out the two 12mm bolts that holds the power steering pump so we can lift the pump and this reservoir up and tuck it over this AC line to just sit it out of the way so then we can get better access to the alternator. So first step is we're going to remove that 12mm bolt right there. And then there's another one that's directly under the pulley. You're going to have to feel your hand under here to feel it, but you will. It's a 12mm. We're going to remove both of those. And then we're going to lift it up and tuck it over top. I'll show you how to do it. All right, so I have a 3/8 ratchet, little extension, and a 12mm socket. Go ahead and remove these bolts. All right, one 12mm bolt. Now the next one, you're not going to be able to see it, but you can feel it. Directly under the center of this power steering pump pulley. I like to have my finger on it, and then I guide the socket over to it. All right, and now I'm on it. All right, and there's the bolt. That's a 12mm. Put that to the side. And now your power steering pump should be fully disconnected. So we can grab the reservoir and the pump. We'll disconnect that over there just to give us a little bit more room. All right, we're just gonna sit it up there like that. Try to, you know, just get it out of the way because directly under that is our alternator, which we're gonna be removing. All right, next step, we're gonna remove that green plug off the top of the alternator. So you're gonna pinch on the right side of this, pinch that, and then pull it up. And it should come out just like that. And if you're having trouble doing that, you can pinch it with one hand, and under the left side with this pry tool, so you just slide it right down at the base and barely pry it up, and it'll help you get that out if it's a little stuck. All right, and now we can work on fully removing this alternator. So there's going to be three 12mm bolts, one right here on the top, and then there's two on the bottom that we can't see right now. So we're going to begin to first remove the top 12mm bolt. All right, now these bolts are pretty long, just so you guys are aware. All right, so before I actually fully remove this top alternator bolt, I'm going to leave that threaded in just a little bit so we can go ahead and remove the bottom ones first, and then we'll pull the top one out last because that'll just be a little bit easier. What you're going to want to do is get your hand on the alternator and slide it down towards the front of the vehicle. You're going to feel on both sides, on this side and on this side, the two bottom bolts that are under there. They're both 12mm. You're going to want to go ahead and break those both loose and try to remove them. What I'm going to use to do that is a 12mm socket with a really small stubby extension. So that's the extension. and that's my 12mm short socket. That seems for me to fit in there perfectly. So optionally, if you remove the clips under the vehicle, you can actually pull all this plastic down as well, and you'll also have access right there if you are having a hard time removing these bolts. All right, so I'm just trying to quickly show you where those two bolts are. The wrench right now, or the socket, is on the driver's side bottom bolt. And then if I moved this wrench just a little bit over here, that would be the passenger side bottom bolt. So we're gonna go ahead and remove those two bolts. All right, now I'm just unthreading the rest of this by hand. It just seems a lot easier than trying to move a ratchet. All right, and that is one of the two bottom 12mm bolts for the alternator. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the other one. So yeah, I like to really just break these free with the ratchet, get them pretty loose, and then I can finish it off with my fingers. It's just a lot easier than trying to get that ratchet to move back and forth and with everything in the way. All right, and there is the second 12mm bolt for the alternator. All right, and then last but not least, we're gonna remove that top bolt finally. You might have to wiggle the alternator a little bit, and then that's gonna make the alternator want to drop, so you can put that off to the side. Now we have one last thing we got to remove. We're gonna pull the alternator over a little bit like that, and then there's a rubber boot right on here, and you're gonna peel that boot back, and then there's a 10mm nut that you actually have to take off. So now you guys can clearly see it. So I peeled this rubber boot back, and there's a 10mm nut. You're gonna remove that real quick. So we will peel that boot away, and our 10mm socket on there. Oh, that's on tight. Should not be that tight. All right, then you're gonna wanna grab that little 10mm nut, put that off to the side. Your new alternator should come with one of those, but it's just better to not lose them. And that will allow you to pull this wire off of the alternator, and then there's just a little clip that holds this wiring harness over here onto the alternator. And you can actually remove the bracket that holds the clip, which tends to be a little easier than trying to get the clip out. That'll require an 8mm socket. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. All right, and that is the small 8mm nut that holds the bracket on that wire clips to. So hope you guys can see this. But now that wiring harness is fully disconnected from the alternator, and we can finagle this thing up through the top to get it out. I'm gonna try my best to show you guys this. The alternator's fully disconnected, and I'm gonna be twisting it around and pulling it up to get this out. Just like that. That actually wasn't too bad at all. Here is the old alternator. All right, now with the alternator removed, I can clearly show you guys this wiring harness. There's the green plug, the boot that has this little connector on it that had the 10mm nut, and then further down on that wire is the bracket. That's the 8mm nut that we had removed that actually attaches to the alternator. So this is just a clear example of what I was explaining earlier. And now it's just also a great time to point out the two bottom mounting bolt holes for the alternator are right down there, one there and one there. And then the top mounting bolt for the alternator is right there. All right, I just want to do a quick side-by-side comparison. On the left, we have the old Honda OEM made by Denso alternator, and on the right side we have a Duralast alternator. You could use any type of alternator that will be compatible with this vehicle. This is just what I had available to me. I'll have links down in the description for an OEM Honda alternator made by Denso, and then an aftermarket one. Both should work fine. Just wanted to show you guys a quick side-by-side comparison. They look identical. So we are now going to go ahead and install our new alternator. All right, now we're going to install the new alternator. So you're going to want the pulley on the passenger side of the vehicle, and you're going to want to end up with this black casing towards the driver's side. So we're gonna try to lower this in there and get it oriented correctly. Bear with me. All right, now that the alternator is back down there, we're gonna remove that little 10mm nut right off of that copper looking post. So you're gonna wanna hold on to that nut for a second. Grab your wiring harness over here. The wire that has that boot on it, you're gonna wanna pull the boot back and put that terminal onto the copper post on the alternator. You might have to turn the alternator to get it all to match up correctly. There we are. So you can see that's on the post right there. Then you can reattach the 10mm nut onto that. All right, and you're just gonna snug this up. You do not wanna go too tight or you can end up snapping the post. So I'm just gonna go a little more than hand tight with the ratchet. Okay, and then once you have that on there nicely, you can tuck that boot back on top and it should clip all onto there to seal it off. All right, and then next, you're gonna wanna grab the bracket that 8mm nut was on and try to reattach that, and then reattach the 8mm nut. Try to give you guys the best angles that I can. It's a little tight. Get that 8mm nut started on there. It's right there. That's holding that bracket on. All right, now that you have your 10mm nut onto that little terminal on the side of the alternator, and you have that 8mm nut holding the bracket onto the side of the alternator, you can go ahead and plug in the green plug back onto the alternator. Make sure you hear that click so you know it's fully on. And then you can take your long alternator mounting bolt, which goes on the top, and we're gonna lift the alternator up, and this bolt is gonna go through the alternator, through this sleeve on the alternator, and it's gonna go right into this hole right over here. So you're gonna have to pick this alternator up and move it over to get it on. So I put the bolt into there, and I like to lift it up a little bit. You might have to rotate it back and then slide that bolt in just like I did there, and thread a couple threads in by hand just to get it started. All right, once you have that top bolt threaded in like that by hand, you can grab your other 2 bolts that go on the bottom and feed those in and get them all started by hand before we tighten all of them. All right, that's one of them. Now we'll do the second one. Feed it down. You have to feel for the hole. Might need 2 hands for this one. And some people also like to do this from the bottom. I've just always done it from the top. All right, so we're in the hole. I'm just threading that in by hand. All right, now that I got everything started by hand, I'm gonna start by tightening the 2 bottom bolts. So we're gonna get our 12mm socket with our short extension and get down in there and tighten them up. We're just gonna snug them up pretty tight. If I can find the torque specs, I'll put them on the screen now and down in the description. All right, 2 bottom bolts are pretty snugged up. Now we'll go ahead and do the top. All right, top bolt snugged up. All right, next we can reattach our power steering pump. So we're gonna wanna get it back into position. There is 2 spots that you're gonna need to look out for. There's a bolt hole right down here and another one right down here. Those are the 2 12mm bolts to mount the power steering pump back up. So we'll put those into place. Get one of your bolts, start this by hand. All right. All right, that one's started, and then we can start the bottom one. And once you have both of these bolts in, we can snug those down tightly. All right, so we're gonna snug this top bolt. All right, nice and tight. And then again, down under the center of the pulley is your bottom bolt. And we're gonna snug this one up as well. All right, you can then go ahead and slide this power steering hose back into the clip, and we're going to wait to put the reservoir back because now we're going to put the belt back on. All right, so now right before we install this new belt, I just wanted to show you the one that I'm going to use. It's a Duralast Poly V belt. Here's the part numbers. I'm also going to have links down in the description for the parts used in this video. But what I like to do is take out the new belt and get the old belt, get them side by side and pull them tight to make sure that I can somewhat match this length to confirm that it's the correct belt. So these look pretty good to me. I'm gonna go ahead now and show you how to install it. All right, so I'm gonna put a belt diagram on the screen now, and there'll be a couple different ways you can actually install this. You could do it from the top or from the bottom. I kind of do a variation of both. I have a video that I've already made on how to install serpentine belt on this vehicle, so if you guys need a more in-depth video, you can go and visit that. There'll be links down in the description for that. I'm going to try my best right now to just show you generally how I'm going to get this belt back on. I'm going to start it on the top, feed the rest of it down, and try to get as much as I can on the pulleys following the belt diagram. All right, so I fed the belt down to the bottom. I got the belt around the crank pulley right there, the big one, the AC compressor on the right there, and then I got it around this other pulley right here. And then so once it's on those three pulleys, I came up top right here and I'm holding the rest of the slack right here. So now I got to get it around the alternator pulley, the power steering pulley, and then probably last will be the tensioner pulley. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be right back. All right, so I just finished getting the belt on, and I just wanted to go over really quickly how I did it. So I got my 14mm wrench on the tensioner pulley bolt, and I have my 22mm wrench attached to that. Right, I used the box end right into the open end, and it actually matters on the direction of your wrench. So you can see my box end is bent in like one direction. So if you put it in the wrong way, when you go to pull the wrench, it's going to hit on the front of the vehicle like really early. But if you took this off and flipped it the other way and put it on, see, now it's coming back only to here. So I have a lot more room to pull it. So I got the belt on everything up on the top, everything in the middle, and then what I did was I pulled that tension. So I got my wrench and I pulled that tension towards the front of the vehicle, and then I came down here and I put the belt onto the crankshaft pulley last. So I fed it around the bottom and then halfway up on the top, and then I got my palm and I pushed it over to over the pulley, and then it slid on fully. So that's just a little trick that I did. I usually don't do it from the bottom, but it just seems a little bit easier to do it from the bottom in this situation. Now I also want to mention they do have tensioner pulley wrenches that they sell specifically for doing serpentine drive belts. So you can take a look at those links in the description for one of those if you want them. They sell them in sets that come in different metric sizes and everything, so those might be a good tool to have if you're an everyday mechanic. But in our case, if you're watching this video to fix your alternator, then you're probably just going to do it once. But in our case, if you're just doing this job once, then a 14mm and let's say a 22mm, you can connect these together and make it work. All right, now that we have the belt back on, we can go ahead and reattach our plastic. So I only had removed 2 clips. Those are the 2 that are right up here. All right, now you can go ahead and reinstall your passenger side front wheel. Always start your lug nuts by hand. We're going to tighten these in a star pattern, and then we're going to lower the vehicle down and use a torque wrench and torque these down to 80 foot-pounds. All right, we got our torque wrench set to 80 foot-pounds of torque. Do this in a star pattern. And then you want to double check. All right, now we can reinstall the power steering reservoir bracket. That's going to be 2 10mm bolts. It's going to go right down there like that. Start these by hand. And you can go ahead and snug these both up. You can pull your reservoir back over Going to attach this hose into this bracket down at the bottom. I don't know if you guys can see that, but right down there, there's this little clip. You're going to want to clip the bottom power steering hose back in there. The other hose up top goes right into there. And then the reservoir itself clips down onto this bracket. Just like that. All right, and last but not least, we can reconnect the battery. So make sure you guys clean off your terminals and the connectors before you put everything back together. So again, this is a 10mm socket. And you don't want to over tighten these because they will bend and break. Just snugging them up like that, they won't go anywhere. And if you were continuously trying to start this car after the alternator went, which means the battery wasn't charged up, then you might need to charge this battery or jump start the vehicle to get it initially started. Now we'll go inside and I'll show you guys how to get everything else set back up. All right, now once you're in the vehicle, you're gonna turn the key on and you're gonna look over at your radio. You press the power button. Since you disconnected the battery, you're gonna have to enter a code to use the radio again. So typically that code's on a sticker on the inside of this glove box, but if it's not there, then you should check in your Honda user manual that they gave you with the car. You should have a card that might say something like this, and there'll be a code on it right under here, under my thumb. So we're gonna go ahead and enter my code. And there you go. Now you're all set up. So the radio's back on, and then you're gonna wanna reset your clock. So you can hold this button over here where it says clock. You'll hear that beep. And then there's hours and minutes. So press the hour to whatever hour it is, the minutes, and then you just hit clock and it will be all finished. All right, I got the little jump box hooked up. Hopefully that's enough. Let's try to start her up. Not enough. All right, and so my battery is pretty dead and the car won't start. So what I'm gonna do is take these alligator clips, attach them to the battery, and I'm gonna charge this battery with a battery tender. I'll have a link in the description for that as well. I usually use this for like over the winter time with the lawnmower and other vehicles. So positive to the positive, negative to the negative. Then I plug this in. Usually it's just the safest bet so they don't actually accidentally touch anything. And then on this is a 5 amp automatic battery charger and maintainer. So it'll charge the battery. It shows you it's charging. That's the orange light. Once it's fully charged, it'll switch to green. I don't think I'm gonna need to wait for it to be fully charged, but I'm gonna let it sit for about an hour and then I'll try to start this up. And then after that, since it's a new alternator, that's what charges the battery. So the alternator should be doing the work after the battery's ready to go. And then once you have your car started and running, a good thing to do is to always test the voltage that the car's running at once it's running, because it should be getting that all from the alternator. So you should get a multimeter, put it to DC volts, and then you want to put one terminal on the positive and one on the negative, and you should be reading over 13.5 volts. It should be kind of close to 14. Sometimes it is 14, but if you're not seeing that reading, then that means your alternator is not working still. But if you did everything correctly, then your alternator should be charging the vehicle as it's running, which should be near 14 volts, as I said. All right, guys, and that's about it. That's how you replace an alternator on a 2007 to 2011 Honda CRV. If you guys have any questions at all, please leave them down in the comments. I'll try to get back to you. If this video helped you guys out, please leave me a like. And if you're looking for more of this kind of content, then hit that subscribe button, because there'll be plenty more videos coming your way. I appreciate you guys sticking through on this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.